Hi, welcome to session 3, week 6, language. Last week I shared with you some examples from the first chapter of my novel, examples of what chunking and plunking actually looks like. And hopefully I demonstrated by reading not only some exposition that I had in there, some expository writing, but I also had notes to myself, red herring, reminders. I had Google Outer Banks in brackets as a reminder to myself to Google the scenery of the Outer Banks in North Carolina, where part of my novel is set. And I promised that I would share as a concrete example how chapter 1 is evolving. So in this section called language, where we are moving down the funnel, just working another layer of the funnel, and again, it doesn't mean that you're not moving up and down the funnel. I'm introducing this to you in layers, and I think it's a lot more fun and a lot less overwhelming to work in layers, because then as you repeatedly give your manuscript bake time and you get distance away from it, and you get objectivity, you can see a lot more clearly what needs to be shaved off next, or what needs to be added, or what needs to be refined. It's very hard to do that in the early phases of a novel when you don't even know what the world is that you're creating, when you haven't even created the world yet. So language, here's a concrete example of chapter 1. I have one of my main characters goes to a doctor. She's pregnant, and they find that she has a mass on her ovary. They don't know what it is, and they will have to take an ultrasound. So between the time of that scene, okay, so the doctor says you're going to have to come schedule an ultrasound, and the scheduling of the ultrasound, another appointment with a different doctor where she learns what's going on with her ovary. There's a wait period, and there's a wait period because because there is. I don't even want to get into it, but there's a wait period. So she's got 4 days between these two appointments. So something has to happen in those 4 days. I mean, I could just, next scene, she's at the new doctor, 4 days have passed. And that's a choice that I can make. That gets back to our last session called Pacing and Tension, where there are times when a novelist wants to create suspense, so he or she will draw things out, make you wait, for the resolution of a particular conflict or incident. There are other times when you really can condense time and you don't have to say every little thing that's happening, because that does drag the pacing of the novel down. It needs to move. I'm sure you've read books. In fact, a friend of mine just read a book that I believe won the Pulitzer Prize. I think it's called A Goldfinch. I think it's called A Goldfinch. And I asked him, I had heard of it. I didn't know that it had won the Pulitzer, and I asked him what he thought. My friend is a voracious reader. He's actually one of the readers for my novel. And he said he loved it because it takes place in Manhattan, and he doesn't live in Manhattan, and he's not from there, but he spends a lot of time there because he just loves it. So he spends a lot of time visiting, and visiting friends, and spending weekend getaways there. And so, uh, and he said, well, that's one of the things I really loved about it. And he said it was really moving for me. And then I got to the point where he said, he said, we're kind of slowed down. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, one of the characters, I guess the main character, does a lot of ruminating, thinking inside his head. I think it's a he. And so there's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of dialogue with other people. It's an internal monologue. And so there's not a lot of movement. So he said for him, generally speaking, he loved the novel. It was moving. The pacing was moving at a clip, and then it dragged for him. He finished it, but the pacing slowed almost kind of to a drag because of this rumination. Now, that's not an indictment of the novel in any way. Uh, Perhaps there are other people who've read the book who love that aspect of it. Unlike a film, uh, the novel as a storytelling medium does allow for that kind of internal exploration of worlds, and that in part is what makes novels fun to read. The question then becomes, it's the novelist's choice. The novelist makes those choices. To what extent do I show this internal world? For some novels that might be the point. Some of these psychological dramas, they position it like there's 50 people in a room, but it's really 50 people in somebody's head. Or, you know, how do I want to show this? So pacing and tension, it's about time. It's in part about time. How do you play with time? And you can do that. Being a novelist is very powerful. It's a very powerful place to be. You are creating a world. You are the master of this universe. So with language, with this scene, I could just compress it, and she can go from one doctor's appointment to another doctor's appointment, and that is the flow of events, as I said in the last section. But it doesn't, there's no deliberate pacing to it. It's just a flow of events. And the novel reading experience is an emotional experience. So you want to have rise and flow, and ups and downs, and you want to send people on an emotional roller coaster ride of some sort, depending upon the content of your novel. You want them to feel excited, and to feel love, and to feel sadness, and to feel energetic, and to feel things are moving. And that's you do that with pacing and tension. Language is about the actual particulate of words. And I'm not talking about the movement across flow of events, pacing and tension. I'm talking about the expression of that movement within uh, within the containers known as words and sentences. So what's important about language here is you needn't think of yourself as being some great poet. Oh, I'm not a poet, I can't do that. Oh, this is a place where people tend to get stuck because they get anxious, and that goes back to thinking about the work. Oh, now it's language, so now I have to write like this one, or it has to sound like no, forget about the work, and simply, once again, go to the work and simply start reading. That's how you short circuit that counterproductive loop of the yaya. All right, you go to the work and you ask the work. So between these two doctor's appointments, I chose, from a pacing and tension standpoint, to show her in her new environment in Durham, North Carolina, because she has moved from this beach house that I talked about in chapter 1. She's relocated from the beach house in the northern Outer Banks to Raleigh, Durham. So I want to say something about, I choose to say something. Again, it's my choice, it's not right or wrong, about this transition. There will be times when I don't talk about the transition because it doesn't really, it could drag the story down. It doesn't advance the story. So between those two doctor scenes, I literally wrote in chapter 1 what happens between these two scenes. That's what I wrote. And then went to bake, and then I went on to chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. Didn't agonize on it. I didn't know what happened. At that moment, I had some of chapter 1, I had some of it, I didn't have all of it. Keep going. That's really important, not ruminating. Okay. You go to the work says, that's it for now, then that's it for now. And I'm trying to bring all of these elements together of the funnel and show you how they all work together, even though I've introduced them separately and in layers. They are not mutually exclusive, they all work together. So I decided to show her transition because she has moved, and I want to say something about that. The next time I went to chapter one, or the next couple of times I went to chapter one, and when I saw what happens between these scenes, I had already chunked and plunked some research in there. So this is what replaced me talking to myself in chapter one, what happens between these two scenes. Now in Raleigh, Durham, Sheila's been living in an apartment in the nearest metro city to Outer Banks. That's, again, just working with my research. Sheila was in the city again, memories of growing up in Philadelphia and the resources Edgar had set up for her. While she would have preferred tree-lined streets of older established neighborhoods, after having spent much of the summer in Kerala, they pronounce it, Sheila felt it was important to be closer to civilization and medical care. In Durham, there was no shortage of medical care, with Duke University Hospital being the city centerpiece as largest employer. Sheila lived in a condo in downtown Durham and is within walking distance of Brightleaf Square in Durham. We offer the convenience and fun of living downtown. This is me taking uh, a chunk, taking some of my from my research file that I got about some of these fancy new artsy condos in downtown Durham. We offer the convenience and fun of living downtown as well as a truly unique community. We offer a walker's paradise. Sheila, would have preferred it. So that's just the, research was just chunked and plunked in there. Sheila would have preferred a townhouse, but didn't want to deal with the stairs. So she was in a condo unit within walking distance of downtown, which was undergoing a revitalization. She's thinking about next steps after the abortion. Edgar had agreed to give her a reference stunningly. So what's important to note about language here, if you didn't get it, that's not that what I just read to you is not will not make for ultimately an enjoyable reading experience. And that's okay because we're not at the ultimate, we're not at the end of the reading experience. We're not at that point yet. We're at the point where we're chunking and plunking. But here's what's important to notice: the progression of moving down the funnel. Okay, where is that funnel? I don't have it. Um, I went from there was nothing, okay, to then what happens between these two scenes. I made a decision. Okay, I didn't agonize. It was just that when I went to the work that time, chapter one, the work said something happens between these two scenes. Just to go, to go from doctor's appointment to doctor's appointment, just it wasn't working for me from a pacing standpoint. I wanted to create a little suspense about what's going on with this cyst. So yeah, okay, well then, all right. So now I decide. I go to the work, and the work says, yeah, we're gonna show her transition. That's all chunked and plunked what I read to you. That is not polished writing. And I'm reading that to you because I want you to really get this point. I'm gonna say should this time. It should. I don't like to use the word should, but it should not be polished writing, from my view, using this process at this point. Okay? Too early. But now, okay, then I went to the then did my iterative writing. Then I went to chapter one again. I went to the work, and I'm reading, and those opening lines and dialogue, everything that was flowing. And then I got to, oh, well, okay, that's just chunking and plunking. I need to smooth that out. So from going to nothing to what happens between these two scenes to that hodgepodge of chunk and plunk, from research, from subconscious, sandboxing, brainstorming, I started to shape and smooth that hunk of clay. And now the next iteration reads like this: Edgar arranged for Sheila to live in a single level condo unit in Durham. Downtown was still undergoing revitalization. Brightleaf Square, a section of renovated turn of the century tobacco houses at its forefront. Opened in 19, and right there, I got caught because there's something off there. And see, the work tells you, but opened in 1981, Brightleaf Square was only 5 years old, with new restaurants and retail attracting more pedestrian traffic than Sheila was used to while summering in Kerala. The coastal town, which had only started to see development in the 1970s, was at the northern end of the Curatic Banks. This was a 20-mile stretch of sand on a 50-mile long peninsula that reached from the state of Virginia down to North Carolina's Oregon Inlet. 15 to 20 miles away from the central Outer Banks regions, Corolla's seeming remove from the rest of the world was an atmosphere tailored for Sheila's mental drifts in charcoal sketches when she had time to herself between tutoring responsibilities. The number of things to demonstrate in that paragraph germane to this session: language. We've seen how I went from that hodgepodgey, chunk and plunk, to something that's actually readable now, something that for somebody who didn't know anything about this book, they could read that sentence, they would know what's going on, they would know where they were. You get a sense of place, Brightleaf Square in Durham. And I might even shave some of that research because it sounded a little researchy, but I also want to show that we are in 1986 and we're not in 2014 because Durham is different now. But it's smoother. It's not that, it's actually real sentences now. It's not a hodgy-podgy. And that's what you're doing. You go to the work and then you read it. And when something goes, like it's off, uh, then you deal with it, whatever that happens to be. For me, in this sentence, I kept going Brightleaf Square. I said Brightleaf Square like 3 times, and I just needed to combine these, 2 sentences. So you just keep. That's what I mean by language. Uh, I'm not. We're still not into. Is it pretty? Poetry, lyrical. We're gonna get to that. But what we're doing at this stage is we really want to clean up the hodgepodge now. Basically, that chunking, plunking. When you at this stage, week 6, when you go to your chapters, now your readers, and obviously you're not giving chunking and plunking to your readers. I want to make that clear. You do need to give your readers something that is expository. All right, that does need to apply to the chapters that you're sending to them, but um, you just at this stage, all those little notes to yourself, all the little research tags, anything that is not clear exposition and dialogue needs to either go away or be transformed into expository writing so that you are now having a true reading experience as opposed to a working draft document. That's what we're doing with language at this point. Next session is the last one for this week. See you soon.